First things first, Rickson Gracie, living legend in the sport of jiu-jitsu. And I love every comment you leave me, even if it's negative or you think that I'm wrong, because all comments help me defeat that evil YouTube algorithm monster. So please comment away. But before we get into it, I know Rickson Gracie could probably still beat me up. I know Rickson Gracie has better jiu-jitsu than me. I know Rickson Gracie has done a lot more for jiu-jitsu than I have, so you can save those comments or not. You can still write them. It still helps me, but I know all of those things before we get into this. I was reading BJJ World the other day, and I really like them. You should check out their content. And they had an article about a quote from Rickson Gracie where he said, "In the past, when we arrived in the US, we were teaching jiu-jitsu to karate black belts who at the time felt like they knew everything. When they got exposed to real jiu-jitsu, they would say that they lost 20 years of their lives doing karate, and now they realize what the real thing is. So somehow, when I go to a BJJ seminar these days, I get the same impression from jiu-jitsu black belts. They're like, wow, I never thought that this existed in jiu-jitsu. If we don't do something very soon, jiu-jitsu will lose its fight identity." He's referencing a mythical place called the early 90s, where karate guys would go to Gracie jiu-jitsu gyms for challenge fights to think that they could prove that karate was superior to jiu-jitsu, and as we all now know, it is not, and they would get beat up and ragdolled. This is what he is comparing modern jiu-jitsu black belts to, people who never took a jiu-jitsu class before and have no idea what it is. I think what sticks out most to me about his quote is where he says it's, quote, real jiu-jitsu, and he's talking about this specific time, this real jiu-jitsu that they used on these karate guys and people who had no idea what jiu-jitsu was, the original game that came to the United States in the early 90s. And comparatively, if that's real jiu-jitsu, then modern jiu-jitsu must be not real jiu-jitsu. But jiu-jitsu has evolved, and that evolution has changed the sport pretty significantly over the last 30 years. But that doesn't mean that the modern game is somehow bad or lesser than the game from Rickson Gracie's prime in the 90s. In related news, NBA players are still doing pretty good despite having terrible skyhook shots, and goalies in the NHL are really great despite having never played without a mask before. And this quote from Rickson obviously led to a lot of back and forth on social media in the conversation of who would win, prime Rickson Gracie or Gordon Ryan. And I don't really want to get into that debate, and I don't really like those kind of debates in any sport. Who was better, LeBron or prime Michael Jordan? Part of the reason I don't like these debates is that it's an unanswerable question. We'll never know. Prime Rickson Gracie will never time travel to face prime Gordon Ryan, so we'll just go round and round. Everyone will give their opinions, and then we'll never find out who was right. But the second reason I don't want to get involved in this conversation is I am pretty sure Rickson Gracie could still beat me up, and Gordon Ryan can definitely beat me up, so I don't want to make either of those guys mad. So we'll just say I don't know who would win, but please feel free to jump in down in the comments and let me know your thoughts. I do get the basis of what Rickson Gracie is saying. The modern jiu-jitsu game does look very different than the more traditional minded game that the Gracies favored. And there's a reason that the IBJJF pushed back against heel hooks for so long. There's a reason that they started banning Eddie Bravo's techniques as soon as he started winning with them. The traditional jiu-jitsu game that came to America in the early 90s is very different than the modern game of today. Again, that's not a bad thing. But I agree that people should learn that traditional game. People should still take things from Rickson Gracie's game and use it in their own, especially if they want to have a well-rounded game. If you want to be good at the modern stuff, you can't ignore the fundamental techniques, and there is still a place in competition for fundamental techniques. When you look at the most recent ADCCs, there's a reason that the rear naked choke is still the king of the submissions. It works. But just because you favor a more traditional game, it doesn't mean that the sport has not evolved, that evolution was not a good thing, and that does not mean that the modern jiu-jitsu game is not real jiu-jitsu. All sports change over time. If enough people are doing the same techniques, then you need to innovate in order to win. You need to change the game in order to be successful. So to say that the best grapplers in the world right now and black belts at seminars are worse than karate guys who've never seen jiu-jitsu before, I don't think that's fair to say. And to say that there's people who are BJJ black belts who there's things they didn't know existed in jiu-jitsu, I mean, I'm not Rickson Gracie, I get that, but I don't think there's a black belt out there who's surprised by something that they didn't know existed in jiu-jitsu. As a black belt, there's always things that you can learn. It's a never-ending tree of technique that you can expand on for the rest of your life. But to be surprised that you didn't know something existed, I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. Whose side are you on in this debate, me or Rickson Gracie? Probably Rickson Gracie because he's a lot cooler than me. But I appreciate you watching, and I will see you all in the next video.